Welcome to the deep dive. I really hope you're sitting down for this one.
Yeah, or at least somewhere where you can, just pause and stare into the middle distance for a minute.
Exactly. Because we are about to cover a conversation today that I can really only describe as a controlled demolition of everything we think we know about how the world works.
It is a heavy one. We're looking at a very dense, very high-level discussion between the podcaster Peter McCormack and Curtis Yarvin.
Right, and for those who don't know Yarvin, or his pen name is Manicius Moldbug, he isn't exactly a guy who deals in small talk.
Not at all.
He's this neo-reactionary thinker, a computer scientist, and someone who basically specializes in taking the systems we trust, so democracy, the stock market, the internet, and explaining why they are not just broken, but effectively already dead.
Yeah, system collapse is the headline here.
Yeah.
But not the Hollywood version.
Right, no zombies.
No zombies, no buildings falling down. Yarvin is describing a collapse that feels more like a computer operating system that has just completely stopped working. But the screen is still frozen on the desktop image.
Oh, wow.
So you think it's working,
Yeah.
but nothing behind the scenes is actually moving.
That is a genuinely terrifying image. So the mission today for us is to really unpack his thesis that our economic engines are just running on fumes, our political systems are theater, and technology is about to make human labor completely obsolete.
And we should definitely be clear right up front, Yarvin is a provocateur.
Very much so.
The ideas we are going to walk through today are highly controversial. He challenges the red team and the blue team equally. We're just looking at the source material, but he talks about the death of white-collar work, the red ink of the stock market, and this very uncomfortable concept of the duty to rule.
I have to admit, I found myself arguing with the source material half the time. And then, I don't know, 5 minutes later, realizing, oh, that actually explains why everything feels so weird right now.
Yeah, that's usually the reaction to Yarvin. You really don't have to agree with his solutions to find his diagnosis incredibly sharp.
Okay, so let's jump straight into the thing that hurts the most, which is our wallets.
Always a good place to start.
Right. Because we are programmed, I mean, literally from the time we take our first civics or economics class, to believe that a booming stock market is the ultimate sign of a healthy country. Green arrow goes up, we are all getting richer. But Yarvin says this is a lie.
Not just a lie, but a fundamental misunderstanding of accounting. He introduces this concept of red ink.
Which usually means debt, right? Like if a company is in the red, they are losing money.
Correct. But he applies this to the entire financial system.
Yeah.
So he starts with a really basic accounting identity. Liabilities equal debt plus equity.
Okay.
Now, normally you and I, we think of equity stocks as an asset.
Because it's something you own.
Right. But from the perspective of the system, the actual structure that issues the currency and manages the economy, equity is a liability. It's a claim on the system's real resources.
Wait, hold on. I want to make sure I get this. If I own a share of Apple, that's my asset. Why is it the system's liability?
Because that share represents a claim on future dollars, future labor, and future goods. So Yarvin argues that when the stock market goes up, it is functionally identical to the government printing money.
Okay, that is a huge leap. Usually we say government prints cash, that's inflation. Companies build better mousetraps and their stock goes up, that's value creation. He's saying those are the exact same thing.
He's saying the effect on the system is the same. Look at it this way. If the government prints $1 trillion and just hands it out, we all agree that dilutes the currency.
Right, your dollar buys less.
Exactly. Yarvin argues that if the stock market inflates by $1 trillion, you have essentially created $1 trillion of new spending power that did not exist before.
Oh, I see.
It is red ink. It increases the total quantity of dollar-denominated assets in the world.
So if the S&P 500 doubles, it's not that we suddenly have twice as much stuff in the world. It's that we have twice as much paper claiming the exact same amount of stuff.
Bingo. And that creates inflation. But, and this is the really crucial part of his argument, it's a specific kind of inflation.
How so?
Well, when the government prints checks for everyone, milk and bread get expensive immediately. But when the stock market pumps, the inflation is concentrated in asset prices.
Ah, like real estate.
Exactly. Houses get expensive. Fine art gets expensive. High-end services. It's an inflation that specifically benefits the people already holding the assets, while completely diluting the purchasing power of the people who just have wages.
So the rich get, I guess, inflated richer, and the poor just have to deal with the side effects.
Yeah, he views it as a massive wealth transfer mechanism. He argues a rising stock market is effectively the government printing money and handing it exclusively to the wealthy.
Well, the government tells us inflation is low. I mean, we see the consumer price index, the CPI numbers. Every month they say, oh, inflation's down to 3%. If all this money is being created in the stock market, why isn't it showing up in that CPI number?
This is where Yarvin dissects the hedonic adjustment.
Which sounds like a luxury feature on a massage chair.
I really wish it were.
No.
It's a statistical tool used by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The source uses the example of a car to explain it, which is super helpful.
Okay, let's hear the car example.
Let's say you bought a brand new sedan in 2014 for $25,000. Today, you go to buy a similar sedan, and the price tag is still $25,000.
Okay, so zero inflation. The price hasn't changed.
That is what a normal person would say. But the government statistician looks at the new car and says, wait a minute, this new car has 6 airbags instead of 2. It has a backup camera. It has better fuel injection.
It's a better car.
Right.
Yeah.
It is technically a better car.
Yeah.
But the statistician says because the quality improved by, let's say, 20%, you are getting more car for your money. So they mathematically adjust the recorded price down.
Wait, what?
Yeah. They might record that the price of the car dropped to $20,000 in quality-adjusted terms, even though you still have to physically write a check for $25,000.
So they use technological progress to hide the fact that the dollar is losing value.
Precisely. Yarvin calls this stealing the dividend.
Stealing the dividend.
Yes, because in a normal capitalist system, technology makes things cheaper to produce. Computers, cars, TVs, they should all be getting cheaper every year in nominal dollars.
Because robots are building them faster.
Exactly. If we had sound money, that car should cost maybe $15,000 today. The fact that it still costs $25,000 means inflation did happen, but the government uses the quality improvement to mask it.
That is incredibly sneaky. They are basically taking the credit for engineers doing their job and using it to cover up the fact that they're printing money.
It creates this total illusion of stability, while the currency just rots from the inside. And this actually brings us straight into his views on passive investing.
Which is the standard advice everyone gets. Buy the index fund. Set it and forget it. I have friends who preach the gospel of Vanguard, but Yarvin hates this.
He thinks it's a symptom of a diseased system. He literally says passive investing should not exist. And to understand why, he distinguishes between alpha and beta.
Break that down for us.
Sure. Alpha is the classic idea of investing. You do your research, you find a company, let's say a startup, making a brand new type of battery that you think is undervalued. You buy the stock.
Because you believe in it.
Right. You are adding information to the market. You are rewarding a good company. If you make money, it's because you are smart. That's alpha.
Okay, so that's honest work in finance.
Then there is beta. Beta is just buying the market. You aren't picking winners. You are just putting your bucket out to catch the rain. Yarvin argues that when you buy an index fund, you aren't actually investing in companies. You are just hedging against currency debasement.
You're trying to outrun the inflation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are just trying to ride the wave of that red ink we talked about.
So we are all basically forced to become gamblers just to stay in the exact same place financially.
That's his point. He says in a sane world, money would be a store of value. You would put your savings in a certificate of deposit, a CD, or a savings account, earn a predictable interest rate, and you'd be totally fine.
But no one does that now.
Because it doesn't work. The fact that teachers, plumbers, and nurses feel absolutely terrified if their retirement isn't heavily exposed to the stock market is proof that the money itself is broken. We are all just scrambling for a lifeboat.
That is the perfect transition because everyone is looking for the exit, right? The lifeboat. If
Yeah.
the dollar is melting, where do you go? And the usual suspects are gold and Bitcoin.
And Yarvin is highly skeptical of both, which is really interesting because he's speaking to Peter McCormack in this source, and McCormack is a massive Bitcoiner.
Let's start with gold. What's his issue there?
He points out that gold has a centralization problem. Governments still hold massive amounts of it. He mentions the brown bottom.
Which refers to Gordon Brown, the former UK Chancellor.
Right, who famously sold off more than half of the UK's gold reserves between 1999 and 2002 at the absolute lowest price possible.
Classic government timing.
Exactly. But Yarvin's point is that the market for gold is still heavily manipulated by what central banks decide to do. But then he drops this absolute sci-fi bomb into the conversation. He calls it scalable chrysopia.
I literally had to rewind the tape 3 times to catch that word. Chrysopia. That's an ancient alchemical term for making gold out of lead, right?
Yes. But he's talking about doing it with modern physics. We actually know how to make gold. You can do it in a particle accelerator or, theoretically, with a fusion reactor.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He describes a setup where you have a tokamak fusion reactor wrapped in a blanket of mercury. The neutrons from the fusion reaction bombard the mercury and physically transmute it into gold.
Is this actually possible, like in the real world?
Physics-wise,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Economically, not quite yet. Right now, it costs way more energy to make the gold than the resulting gold is worth.
Okay, that makes sense.
But Yarvin's point is conceptual. Gold is just an element. It's physical matter. If humanity solves fusion energy, which is the holy grail of physics right now, energy becomes effectively infinite and cheap.
And if energy is cheap,
Then scalable chrysopoeia becomes possible. You could manufacture gold in a lab just like we manufacture synthetic diamonds today.
and if you can print gold, gold is no longer money. It's just shiny metal.
Exactly. It loses its scarcity premium instantly. So gold isn't a guaranteed safe haven forever.
Okay, then what about Bitcoin? Because that's digital scarcity. You can't print Bitcoin with a fusion reactor.
No, you can't. But you might be able to break it with a quantum computer. Yarvin brings up the quantum problem. Bitcoin relies on cryptographic keys, specifically the original ones Satoshi Nakamoto used.
Right, the underlying math.
Yeah, and if a quantum computer becomes powerful enough to run Shor's algorithm efficiently, it could theoretically derive the private keys directly from the public keys.
Meaning someone could just drain the wallets?
Or at the very least, completely shatter the trust in the system. If the math breaks, the value goes to zero. Now, Yarvin isn't saying this will happen tomorrow, but he's highlighting that every single lifeboat we think we have has a leak.
So stocks are a government trick, gold could be synthesized, and Bitcoin could be hacked. That leaves us literally nowhere.
It leaves us deeply vulnerable. And this vulnerability is what sets up his most harrowing geopolitical scenario in the source. He asks us to look closely at the relationship between China and the West.
Right, this was the Argentina with nukes comment that stuck with me.
It's a chilling thought experiment. Think about how the global economy works right now. China makes real things. They make toasters, iPhones, cars, solar panels. They ship those real physical things to the US and Europe.
And in return, we send them digital numbers. We send them fiat currency, dollars and euros.
Yarvin calls it a Sopranos bust out on a planetary scale. We are getting the hard goods, and they're just stacking up our IOUs. But what happens if China decides they have enough of our paper? What if they decide to pull the rug on the West?
How would a rug pull like that even work?
Imagine China secretly buys up a massive amount of gold, maybe even trading those dollars for gold on the open market over years.
Bruh.
Then, one day they announce a new currency backed by that gold, and they say, we are no longer accepting US dollars. We will only trade our goods for gold or our new yuan.
And since we don't really make anything anymore,
We have nothing of actual value to trade. We have no industrial base left because we outsourced it all to them. Yarvin paints this dystopian picture of the West basically turning into a third world country overnight.
Argentina with nukes.
Exactly. We become Argentina with nukes. We still have a powerful military, but our domestic economy completely collapses.
He had that incredibly visceral image of American children digging rare earth minerals out of a hillside with their bare hands, just to have something physical to sell to the Chinese.
It's extreme, definitely, but it perfectly illustrates the danger of an economy based entirely on finance rather than actual production. If the red ink stops working, if the rest of the world stops accepting our printed money, our standard of living just evaporates.
Okay, so that's the financial collapse. But Yarvin argues that even if the money somehow holds up, the way we work is about to completely disappear anyway. Let's get into part 2, AI.
Yes. And unlike a lot of the AI doom-mongering out there, which just focuses on, Terminator-style robots taking over, Yarvin focuses entirely on competence and the screen class.
The screen class, that's us, basically. That's the listeners.
It's anyone who sits in a chair and manipulates symbols on a screen for a living. So lawyers, accountants, copywriters, coders.
Pretty much the entire modern middle class.
Exactly. Yarvin argues that the previous industrial revolution replaced muscle. Machines could lift heavier rocks than men or weave cloth faster. But humans could still think. This AI revolution is replacing cognitive labor.
He used a specific analogy from his own company dealing with coding. He separated the architect from the engineer. I thought this was a really useful mental model.
It's fantastic. So in software, the engineer is the person who actually writes the syntax. They know the programming language, they fix the bugs, they build the specific blocks of code. The architect, on the other hand, is the visionary who decides what to build in the first place.
Like, I want an app that does X, Y, and Z.
Right. And traditionally, you needed 10 engineers for every one architect.
To actually build the vision.
But Yarvin says AI is completely decimating that engineer role. The AI can write the syntax instantly. It doesn't make typos. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't need health insurance.
So the engineers are gone.
Right now, the architect still has a job. They still have to guide the AI, check its work. He refers to it as holding Claude's hand.
But he thinks that phase is temporary, too.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The gap is closing fast. Eventually, the architect won't be needed either. You'll just say to the computer, build me a competitor to Facebook, and it will just do it from scratch. And this leads to what he calls demand destruction for labor.
Wow.
We are seeing the stock market boom because companies are becoming incredibly efficient with AI. Profits are up, but they are firing people to achieve that efficiency.
So we get a rich stock market and a poor population.
Exactly. Which brings us to the resource curse. Now, usually we talk about this concept with oil. It's often called Dutch disease.
I've heard that term. Explain that mechanism for us.
So imagine the Netherlands strikes huge natural gas reserves, which is something that actually happened historically. Suddenly, they have this massive export resource. Foreign money floods into the country to buy the gas. And as a result, the Dutch currency becomes incredibly strong.
That sounds good, though. A strong currency means cheap imports for the citizens.
It is great for consumers in the short term, but it's totally deadly for domestic producers. Because the currency is so strong, it becomes way too expensive for anyone else in the world to buy Dutch cheese or Dutch tulips or Dutch manufactured goods.
Oh, because their goods are priced out of the global market?
Exactly. So the other industries wither and die. The whole economy just becomes the gas company.
And Yarvin is saying AI is the new natural gas.
Yes. AI is a resource that generates massive wealth with almost zero human labor. It's like striking oil in the server room. The owners of the AI get fabulously wealthy, the overall GDP goes up, but because you don't need labor to produce that wealth, the rest of the economy, the part where humans actually work for wages, just hollows out completely.
So what do people do? If you can't be a lawyer or a coder because the AI is better, and you can't work in a factory because the robots are better,
You become a ward of the state. You rely entirely on political redistribution. This is where Yarvin compares the future of the West to Venezuela.
how so?
In a petro state like Venezuela, the government controls all the oil money and just hands out barely enough to keep the population from rioting. The people become entirely dependent on the regime. They lose their agency.
He was pretty savage about universal basic income in this part. He really didn't see UBI as this utopian Star Trek solution.
Not at all. He called it Wally World. He sees it as deeply infantilizing, a world where humans are essentially just pets kept by the machines, fed a monthly allowance just to consume content all day.
Because he argues that human dignity actually comes from struggle, from being needed.
Yes. And this leads to what I thought was the weirdest but most fascinating part of the entire conversation, the gamification of reality.
Yeah, if the machines do everything better than us, do we have to fake difficulty just to stay sane?
It's a profound question. He uses the metaphor of a video game designer. Think about a game like Minecraft. You have creative mode, where you have infinite blocks and you can fly around and build whatever you want instantly. But most people prefer to play survival mode.
Right. They want the monsters, they want the hunger bar to manage, they want to have to dig in the dark for the diamonds.
Because without the struggle, the diamond has no actual value. A game without resistance is just boring. So Yarvin suggests that the government of the future might literally have to act as a game designer for society.
So we might have to artificially ban efficient technology in certain sectors just to preserve the game of life.
You brought up the cobbler example, Daniel Day-Lewis.
Oh, yeah. Daniel Day-Lewis, the famous actor, once took a massive break from Hollywood to apprentice as a shoemaker in Florence. He spent months just making shoes by hand.
And Yarvin asks, why did he do that? He's rich. He could have just bought shoes at the store.
He did it for the craft, for the meaning.
Exactly. And Yarvin suggests we might eventually need to legislate that kind of meaning. Imagine a law that flat out says shoes cannot be made by robots. They must be made by humans.
But that sounds insane economically. Handmade shoes for everyone would cost like $500 a pair.
They would. And that is exactly the point. We would be actively paying a premium for inefficiency. We would be subsidizing the humanness of the product. He argues it might be the only way to keep the cobbler employed and to give people a genuine sense of purpose.
It's basically the Ready Player One scenario, but completely flipped. In that movie, the real world is a dump, so everyone goes into the virtual simulation to be a hero and find meaning. Yarvin says the real world is becoming too easy, too automated, so we have to impose simulation rules on reality to make it hard again.
It's the Etsyfication of the entire economy.
Yeah.
We will end up paying for the story of the item, not the utility of it.
Okay, so the economy is fake, the work is gone. Now let's talk about who is supposedly in charge of all this. The deep state.
Yes, part 3.
This is a term that gets thrown around a lot, usually implying some dark, smoke-filled room of men running the world. But Yarvin doesn't give them nearly that much credit.
No, he doesn't. He views the modern bureaucracy not as a cabal of evil geniuses, but as a Stasi of pure mediocrity.
The Stasi being the infamous East German secret police.
Right. And for people living in East Germany during the Cold War, the Stasis were utterly terrifying. They had files on everyone. They could disappear you. They could ruin your life. They seemed like this omnipotent, invincible monster. But Yarvin points specifically to the Stasi moment, the day the Berlin Wall fell.
November 1989.
The literal day after the regime collapsed, normal people stormed the Stasi headquarters. And what did they find inside?
It wasn't James Bond villains.
No. They found gray men in cheap suits, panicked, frantically trying to shred paper. They found guys who were just worried about what was going to happen to their pensions.
The ultimate paper tiger.
Exactly. Yarvin argues that the American deep state, the permanent bureaucracy in Washington, is essentially a LARP, live-action role play.
They just pretend they are the guardians of democracy?
Yes. They write long, serious emails about stakeholders and interagency cooperation. They convince themselves and everyone else that they're absolutely essential to the survival of the nation. But if push actually came to shove, if a genuinely strong leader challenged them, they wouldn't fight back in the streets.
He says they aren't trained killers. They are just office workers.
They will just pack up their desks and go home. He argues that regime change is actually much easier than people think because the system is completely hollow inside. It's held up by the collective belief that it's strong, not by actual strength.
So how do you fix it? According to the source, if you have this bloated, useless machine, how do you go about rebooting it? He points to Elon Musk and Twitter.
The Musk method. Think about the media narrative when Elon took over Twitter. Everyone was saying you can't fire these people, the site will crash. The architecture is too complex.
And he fired, what, 80% of them?
Something massive like that.
Yeah.
He walked in, fired the trust and safety teams, fired the thousands of middle managers, fired the bloated HR departments.
And the site stayed up. It got glitchy for a bit, sure, but it didn't die.
Yarvin suggests applying this exact method to the U.S. government. It's a very radical proposal. You go in and identify the actual service points, the tangible things citizens actually need from the government.
Like, I need a passport. I need to pay my taxes. I need a court to settle a contract dispute.
The actual interface between citizen and state. You either automate those completely or you staff them with a skeleton crew of highly competent people. And then you just delete the rest. You dissolve the Department of Education. You dissolve the Foreign Office.
He was specifically confused about the Foreign Office. He's like, why do we even have diplomats anymore? If the president needs to talk to Macron, he can just pick up a phone and call him.
It's the idea that 90% of government is just internal friction. It's just bureaucracies fighting other bureaucracies for budget. If you cut the cord, the sky won't fall. You just save $1 trillion and get a government that actually responds to inputs.
But to do that, to fire 1 million civil servants, you need a leader who genuinely does not care about being liked. And this brings us to part 4, which looks at political personas.
This was a really deep psychological dive in the source material. They analyzed the difference between a character and an authentic leader, and they used Nigel Farage as the main case study.
The source made a really sharp distinction between Nigel and Farage.
Yes, Nigel is the real human being. Off camera, he's apparently quite thoughtful, highly introverted, reads a lot of history books, a very serious guy.
But Farage is the suit he wears in public.
Farage is the guy with the pint of beer, the loud laugh, the bombastic populist on stage.
And Yarvin argues he's become trapped in that suit.
He thinks Farage fundamentally believes the public is too stupid to handle Nigel, so he just keeps playing Farage. Yarvin actually compares him to Bon Jovi.
Like, living on a prayer. Stadium rock.
Exactly. It's a performance. It's safe. You know exactly what you're going to get when you buy the ticket. It's pop music politics. But Yarvin contrasts this with a UK politician named Rupert Lowe, whom he compares to the Rolling Stones.
What makes Rupert Lowe the Rolling Stones in this analogy?
Authenticity and danger. Yarvin describes Lowe as a zero-fucks politician. He never apologizes. He never pivots to the center when the media attacks him. He says exactly what he thinks, even if it's deeply offensive to the sensibilities of the media class.
And Yarvin had a theory about where that specific toughness comes from. It was all about football.
The football chairman toughness.
Hmm.
Rupert Lowe used to run Southampton Football Club. Now, if you know anything at all about English football, you know that the fans are passionate.
That is a very polite word for it.
If the team loses, you have 30,000 people screaming pure abuse at you from the stands. They are chanting that you're an idiot, that you're rooting the club. Yarvin argues that this experience calluses your soul.
That makes total sense.
If you can handle a stadium of angry fans, a harsh tweet from a journalist means absolutely nothing to you. You become completely immune to cancellation.
And Yarvin thinks voters can smell that immunity.
It's the strong horse theory. Voters might tell pollsters they want a polite, nice, unifying politician. But deep down in the lizard brain, they want a strong horse. They want a leader who can take a hit and just keep moving forward.
Because when a politician apologizes or tries to explain themselves or triangulates to please the press,
They look weak. Yarvin says they look like a battered wife trying to stop her husband from hitting her. It's a brutal analogy, I know, but it perfectly captures the raw dynamic of power he's describing.
speaking of raw power, Yarvin connects this directly to his favorite historical figure, Oliver Cromwell.
The Lord Protector. Yes, Yarvin introduces this concept of power maxing versus power minimizing.
What's the difference between those two?
A power minimizer is someone who desperately wants the status of being the leader, but really wants nothing to do with the actual responsibility of ruling. Yarvin critiques Donald Trump's first term heavily through this specific lens.
He argues Trump wanted to be the president on TV. He wanted the fanfare, the rallies.
But he didn't want to do the boring, deeply hard work of firing the civil service and meticulously rewriting the federal regulations. He basically let the existing bureaucracy run him.
He was the hood ornament, not the engine.
Exactly. A power maximizer, on the other hand, someone like Cromwell or King Henry VIII, sees power as a heavy burden, a duty. They get in there and they actually rule.
They dismantle the old structures and build new ones from scratch.
They don't care at all about being popular in the moment. They only care about being historically effective. Yarvin argues we are currently in a historical moment that desperately requires a founder energy. Someone who looks at the U.S. government not as a sacred, untouchable temple, but as a failed startup that just needs a hard reboot.
Okay, so we've covered the fake money, the disappearance of work, the hollow bureaucracy, and the psychology of the leader. Finally, let's look outward. Let's talk about geopolitics. And this part really highlighted how much of international relations is just vibes.
Oh, it was the Vance versus Rubio comparison. This is fascinating to read. The source compared two speeches given to European elites recently, one by J.D. Vance and one by Marco Rubio.
And the reaction from those European elites was the key takeaway, right?
Yes. When Marco Rubio finished his speech, the European bureaucrats clapped. They loved it. When J.D. Vance finished his speech, they were terrified.
Now, normal political logic says applause is good. If they clap, you did a good job.
Not if you were actually trying to change the system. Yarvin argues that if the establishment is clapping for you, it's because you are safe. You were playing Bon Jovi. He says Rubio basically allowed the Europeans to rebrand.
Rebrand how?
Well, think about the end of World War II. The U.S. intelligence agencies had spent years working closely with the Soviets to fight the Nazis. Then suddenly the war ends and the Cold War starts. Did the U.S. fire all those intelligence officers and hire new ones?
No.
Of course not. The exact same people just swiveled in their office chairs. Yesterday they were aggressively anti-Nazi. Today they are aggressively anti-Soviet. They just changed the mission statement and kept their jobs.
They rebranded to survive.
Yarvin says Rubio gave the modern Europeans the exact same out. He allowed them to pivot their rhetoric from liberal internationalism to being civilizational defenders without actually changing a single policy. They felt totally safe. They realized, oh, we could just change the slogans on our PowerPoint decks and keep our pensions.
The Vance's speech was different.
Vance threatened to break the frame entirely. His speech implied that the transatlantic alliance itself might be obsolete, that the U.S. might just pack up and go home. That is completely terrifying to a European bureaucrat because it means their job structurally doesn't exist anymore.
And this leads directly to Yarvin's overarching proposal for U.S. foreign policy. He calls it the Gorbachev strategy.
This is the idea of strategic letting go. In the late 80s, Mikhail Gorbachev realized that the Soviet Union simply couldn't afford to keep propping up all its satellite states in Eastern Europe. So he basically just said, you guys are on your own. We aren't sending the tanks anymore.
And the result was the immediate cascading collapse of those communist regimes.
Yarvin suggests the U.S. should do the exact same thing to Europe today. Close the military bases, withdraw the diplomats, stop funding the NGOs, stop funding the establishment, but also stop funding the political opposition. Just leave.
Just cut them off cold turkey.
He fundamentally believes that the political structures currently governing Europe are completely artificial. They only stand up because American money, American military power, and American legitimacy are quietly propping them up from behind. If we pull the plug, the Gorbachev effect kicks in.
The illusion shatters.
And these nations are suddenly forced to face reality. They would have to build real armies, real economies, and secure real borders again on their own dime.
It's basically tough love on a civilizational scale.
It is. And speaking of borders, he touched on immigration with a really sharp paradox that I thought was brilliant. The abolitionist slaveholder.
Oh, man, I definitely winced at this one when I read it.
It's a brutal critique of the modern Western liberal class. He argues that they talk like abolitionists. They use all the soaring moral language of anti-racism, equality, and radical inclusion. But economically, they live exactly like slaveholders.
Because they rely entirely on an imported underclass.
Right. Think about the daily life of a coastal elite. Who delivers their food? Who cleans their office buildings at night? Who raises their children? Who drives their Uber? It is almost exclusively low-wage immigrant labor. Yarvin argues that we have essentially created a robot economy, but we are using human beings as the robots.
Because there's no social connection whatsoever.
Exactly. The master doesn't know the name of the servant. They don't go to the same church. Their kids don't go to the same schools. It's just a sterile transaction on an app.
It creates this incredibly hollow society. We are physically living together in the same cities, but we are occupying two completely different dimensions of reality.
And honestly, that connects every single thread we've talked about today. The red ink wealth separates the rich from the reality of sound money. The AI revolution separates the screen class from the reality of hard work. And this robot economy separates the elite from the reality of their own neighbors.
It paints a vision of a world that is just completely artificial top to bottom. We are all essentially living in a LARP.
Which brings us right back to the Matrix analogy, the blue pill versus the red pill. Yarvin's ultimate point is that this system collapse isn't something we should be afraid of. It's just a necessary moment when the simulation finally breaks down and we hit the hard, solid ground of reality again.
So we want to leave you with the Daniel Day-Lewis question to mull over. If the machines can truly do it all, if they can make the shoes, trade the stocks, and write the laws perfectly, what is actually left for us to do?
Are we just going to let ourselves become pampered pets in Wall-E world? Or are we going to voluntarily gamify our own existence? Are you ready to pay $500 for a pair of human-made shoes just to prove that humans still matter?
It really comes down to a question of whether we want pure efficiency or if we want meaning. Because for the first time in human history, we might actually have to choose between the two.
And that is a terrifying but completely unavoidable choice we have to make.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you on the other side.